Credo Voices, the podcast where we bring you inspiring stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I'm your host, Awele Okibo, the CEO of Credo Advisory.
For generations, football has been more than a game. It's a global language of unity, passion, and identity. But beyond the celebrations, racism and discrimination continue to cast a shadow over the sport. The Euro 2021 finale reignited this conversation when a social media post became a national movement, challenging the status quo in football and beyond. On this episode of Credo Voices, we travel to the UK to meet Amna Abdullatif, a dedicated advocate and one-third of the Three Hijabis, a group using their platform to fight racism, misogyny, and Islamophobia. Through their work, they are striving for a football culture that is safer, more inclusive, and free from discrimination while tackling broader social justice issues. Join us as Amna shares how a single act of defiance became a force for systemic change, using football to fight hate, empower marginalized communities, and inspire a future where the sport truly belongs to all.
Hello, everybody. Today, we have someone that I've been looking forward to talking to for a very long time. And it seemed like fate just didn't want this conversation to happen, but we have prevailed. Amna, could you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
My name is Amna Abdullatif. I am one part of an organization called the Three Hijabis, which is what I'll be discussing here, but have many different hijabs, as I say, to people in terms of issues that I'm passionate about and work that I do of a political nature, but then also more kind of freelancing work on a range of issues around things to do with the world around us.
Yes. So let's start. So your journey into activism is just such an inspiration. Can you tell us what sparked this passion for social justice, and how did you start the Three Hijabis? And first of all, who are the other two?
Yeah, so let me start with the other two, because I think it's really important to name, some of the women that I love dearly and have been working with for a long time, and who I see as my sisters, essentially, in kind of the work that we've been able to do and the support that we've offered one another to be able to continue and persevere in this world. And so one of them is called Shaista Aziz, who is a journalist, an absolutely phenomenal speaker and human rights advocate, and has worked in the NGO sector, supporting and trying to tell the stories of women, particularly, but of individuals across the world who had been in very huge conflict zones. And the second hijabi is Huda Jawad, who again came to this country as a refugee child from Iraq, has focused so heavily on really ensuring that she is there in policy spaces to advise and support in order to make sure that no one else has to kind of go through some of the experiences that she's had to go through, having to leave her home country because of war and conflict. So, I'm in good company, as you can see, in terms of the other two incredible women that I'm fortunate to have with me.
Yes, and you guys seem unstoppable. So how does a single tweet spark a movement, Amna?
It's insane to think that, me and Shaista and Huda had known each other for a number of years prior to starting the Three Hijabis. And during lockdown, we obviously couldn't see each other. We live in different parts of the country. And so as soon as kind of lockdown measures started to open up, I decided to travel down to London, because I'm based in Manchester, to go and see both of them. And Shaista had come across from Oxford, and we'd planned kind of this day together just to catch up. Many of us had gone through, had got COVID, had been ill because of COVID, had been trying to do an incredible amount of work throughout the COVID period to support our own communities. And so, there was a lot to kind of catch up on. And And we sat, in the hotel bar where I was staying at, and watching the quarterfinal game between England and Ukraine at the time, where England won 4-0. And Shaista, who has a very big following on social media because of her journalism, kind of tweeted, Three Hijabis walked into a bar to watch England thrash Ukraine 4-0. And kind of started this dialogue around why it was that suddenly in this country, for the first time in a long time, people of color had started to connect with the England team as a team that we can support. And part of that was because of the inclusive nature of the manager at the time, and the players and the work that they were doing. And there was this change that we could see in the England team, and it went viral.
This is the football team. Yeah.
Yes, the England football team. Sorry. So this was Euro 2021, men's Euros. So this is the men's England team. That tweet was featuring a picture of the three of us with our Diet Cokes, sat watching this game, and it went viral. People were really fascinated by the notion of Muslim women, visibly Muslim women, being invested in and watching the game, which I thought was really bizarre because, I'd grown up with football in my life. We watch, all of the Premiership games, all of the kind of the big games, particularly around the World Cup and the Euros. My mum is the biggest football fan in our household. So it was like, why are people surprised?
Football, for our American audience, soccer, football is really just taught, it's male dominated. It sparked that intrigue around, whoa, wait a minute. Three hijabis, really? And I mean, it's incredible that you guys just really started this national social discourse around something so simple, and it started so organically.
I think the intrigue, was in the fact that voices like ours weren't in the public domain. You don't see visibly Muslim women in kind of public spaces, in the media and across these really big institutions. And so that became a fascination. And it was, we got patronized a lot by, people telling us about how eloquent we spoke and how well we spoke English. And I'm like, oh God, we spent, if we weren't born in this country and been educated in this country, we've certainly spent most of our lives in this country. And so, you have that, all of that happening. But what led from there was, we had this kind of platform of interest from the media, of wanting to speak to us after games, wanting our reflections, which I have to tell you, my mum, who's a very big football fan, found really amusing as to why I was the one kind of feedback around what was happening in each game. So she was finding it hilarious. But then it led to the final. So we started all of this in the quarterfinals, and there was about a week, maybe a week and a half in between that time to the finals. And so we'd already had lots of media interest in us kind of getting to the final. What our thoughts were, how we thought England were going to do. So they were playing Italy in that final. I was like, whatever happens, we should just be proud of the fact that the England team have managed to get us to this stage, because we haven't been at this stage in a very long time. And so, the fact that we've got here is a miracle in its own right, and we should be proud of that. But unfortunately, as many probably know, England lost that game against Italy. It went to penalties, and then in the penalties, 3 young black England players missed those penalties, and essentially then Italy won the game. And I remember I was with Shaista and Huda at Huda's home in Wembley, so she lives very close to where the game was actually taking place. And I remember, the three of us kind of sitting back on the sofa and just like taking a really big sigh and thinking the response to the loss is going to be really bad, and that it's going to encourage a hell of a lot of racism towards not only those players, but also against others in this country. Because we always have this issue in the UK context, particularly where, you're fine and you're British as long as you're winning, essentially. Yes. But suddenly you're no longer British, or you're no longer a part of the national team when you lose, particularly if you're not white British. And instantly we were getting texts and calls and people feeling really scared being around the football stadium, around spaces where the game was being watched in mass, neighbors, saying really racist, derogatory terms to others in the streets. And social media was in flames of racist rhetoric all over the place. Memes around the three young players, some of whom were only about 19 at the time. And I was just like, to me, it was just like, oh God, like my children are not that far in age. And I just thought, it's huge, isn't it? It's a national responsibility. And, you do the best that you can, but, we've never really won any of these games previously. So the idea that somehow, that these young players were, had to hold responsibility for that. To me, it was just such a sad night for what should have been a really positive time for this country, particularly after COVID, after kind of that shutdown and so many deaths and so many people still being ill and the impact of all of that. To come in something positive, to have to, to push on something positive. We kind of slept on it. And then the next morning, we started to talk about a petition. And the petition was to kind of really get to grips with trying to get a national conversation that included the government and the Football Association around what do we do about racists engaging in football in the game. And so the petition was essentially to ban racists from football, which wasn't exactly that we were going to achieve necessarily banning every racist from the game, but it was about extension of what they had at the time, which were banning orders against those that were violent, disruptive in the game. And so that's what we put forward. And it was amazing to see just the kind of how quickly people responded to that petition. And it was almost as if, sometimes people need to be given something to hold on to, some hope that actually there is goodness in the world.
Yes, and they can kind of now come back and support,
Exactly. Yeah. Not everyone has the answers, but if somebody comes up with a potential answer, lots of people want to support that answer. And so that's, all we did was provide a bit of hope and a possible answer. And I think, within the first few hours of us putting that petition out, we started to get media influx towards us, asking us why we did this and what we were doing and how we were doing it and how did we feel about the tens of thousands of people who were signing it, literally, by half day on that Monday morning, I think it was, or whatever day of the week it was, by midday, we'd already kind of got to about 50, 60,000 people signing the petition. And I said to them in the morning, I was like, I mean, if we get 5,000, that's really good, isn't it? At least then we're, and I was just like, we didn't expect the level of.
Yeah, Amna, in 48 hours, you had over 1 million people.
Yeah. And everyone was really invested in it. Everyone wanted us to get to the million. We were on daytime TV. We were on national TV, news stations. Everyone was calling on their platform, the people that were listening, to sign the petition, to get to the million, that this was an important conversation, and it was going on for weeks and weeks after. So we got to the million on the second day, and still the conversation, the media interest on what it means to challenge racism in this country should look like was still going on in the media. And I think that to me is the kind of the biggest part of this, is actually how do we ensure that as a country we are still engaging in a conversation about how we tackle racism in this country. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, is actually even beyond those 2-3 days of really strong petition media interest, is that the interest was still there months after. And even now, the media has been very kind to us in many ways, in terms of really raising the profile of what we're trying to say and what we're trying to do, using football as a mechanism to do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
So with the tremendous impact that the Three Hijabis campaign had, and the success, how do you think, beyond the response that you got, how does it shape your advocacy work? How does it help amplify those voices of those in the marginalized communities? Can you share just a particular moment or a story that stood out? So while you're getting all of these responses, tell me what has come about beyond the national conversation?
Yeah, I mean, we have done a lot of stuff since then. So it's hard to quantify into one thing, and particularly because we've done a lot of campaigning since. So we've continued the conversations around anti-racism, but we also then went into a coalition of a campaign around violence against women and girls in the game, and the association of domestic violence and sexual violence to football specifically. And so that's been an ongoing conversation which has led very different campaign in terms of how much publicity it had, but what it did do was that it created pressure on the Premier League in the UK to implement mandatory consent training to all players and all staff. So that was a big win.
Yes.
We're now doing some work around gendered Islamophobia, because I think Islamophobia is one of those things that is very misunderstood. And often people don't want to talk about Islamophobia. They don't want to talk about the impact that has on many of our communities, and how this is also a racism issue. But, when we talk about anti-racism, we don't talk about specifically anti-Muslim racism. And so we're doing some work around that at the moment, particularly sparked by the Paris Olympics, where because of France's legislation, Islamophobic legislation, it prevented French Muslim women from competing if they wore the hijab, for instance, which lots of people don't know. So you had, Muslim women wearing the veil who were competing from Indonesia, from Germany, from, all over the world in the Olympics, but French Muslim women couldn't. And so, that the kind of the inequality and the racism that's associated to the bodies of Muslim women and their choices was something that we pulled a bit of a campaign together on. But again, didn't get as much of that kind of media interest. But still, it's about, I think with all campaigning and with all these advocacy issues, it's about persistence, isn't it? As perseverance.
Yes.
And for us, it's always the stories. I remember after that first campaign, a Muslim woman contacted us, and she said she's been a football fan since she was a child, but has never been inside a football pitch because she's never felt safe to be in a football pitch as a visibly Muslim woman now. And she said that because of our campaign and because of being unapologetic about the fact that we were football fans and we enjoyed the game, and we talked very openly about our experiences of attending some matches, but also the fact that sometimes we didn't want to attend matches because of fear of, attacks or how we might be received. And she said that she went to her first game. She went to support her team in the first ever game just because of our work. And I just, to me, those are the important bits, isn't it? It's, the fact that somebody can enjoy something that they love without fear. Yeah.
To really experience it and not just watching it on the telly. But I want to talk a little bit more around the culture around football. I mean, I'm not a huge football fan, right? But I've always just in watching the media and just hearing it can be really racially charged. It could be violent. I've seen footage of, football fans like trashing the stadium. I mean, so already what you guys are trying to do is quite remarkable because it's in an environment that is so volatile if it goes the wrong way. It's so, the stories about in Italy, players are being thrown bananas. I mean, there's so many of these stories. So the courage it takes to counter that and fight that is unbelievable. And specifically, you're also addressing the stereotypes around Muslim women, I think is so important. They are those stereotypes. They don't belong in certain places, or they're only interested in certain activities. So there's so many areas of impact that, the campaign has touched on, and I really want to focus on that. It behooves the Football Association to make their stadium safe, inclusive, so that even just there is a financial incentive. You have more people buying tickets. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, for us, that's the biggest piece of work that we're trying to do with all of the stuff that we've been doing around kind of anti-racism and around violence against women and girls, around Islamophobia, is all in connection in terms of how do we shift that culture where people feel safe or unsafe, and and who does football belong to? I mean, one of the things that we kind of, we always talked about is that the fact that football belongs to all of us. It doesn't belong to a particular category of people, and that category of people has often, when we think about football fans, we think about white male, of a certain age. And so at least in this country, obviously, it depends on the context of where you're living, but in this country, that's what it's revolved on. And unfortunately, a lot of the cultural stereotypes about English fans or, English football has been related to a lot of violence. And unfortunately, that's not necessarily shifted over the years. And if when I listen to some of the, black players that we had back in the 80s and 90s, they were talking about the same issues that we're still talking about today, in terms of their experiences on and off the pitch. And it's the same if you're a fan who, has enjoyed the game back in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's exactly the same. And so there's a responsibility there, isn't there, for these football institutions to see the game as much more than just a profit issue, but also about how do you take care of people? How do you safeguard people? And that is the players, but also your fan base as well. And also the staff, because, there's a lot of people who work in football, and lots of them you don't see because they're not the players. They're the people who are on the kind of the behind the scenes of how the whole of these institutions function. One of the things that we really was visible on the morning after the final game, as I mentioned, we were in Wembley. And myself and Shaista and Huda, after we'd submitted that petition, we went down to Wembley Stadium, the area around Wembley Stadium, to have breakfast. And it was a mess. It was, it looked like something horrific had just taken place there. It was carnage in that place. And who was there cleaning up everything? It was people of color. It was, working class people of color who were out on the street cleaning up the rubbish of the night before. And it's like, this is the way that football as an institution looks like. Lower down, you have the ushers, you have the cleaners, you have the people who are kind of keeping the place clean and safe. But they're not the decision makers. They're not the people with any power. And the players have a level of power and influence, but they don't necessarily have the power to change the way in which football is done as an industry, as a business, because that's what it is essentially. So, for us, that's the biggest challenge, is shifting that culture. We've been doing that, a little bit by little. And the Football Association wasn't necessarily that friendly to us when we first started. I think they thought we were one-hit wonders who were going to, do this campaign and then disappear. And unfortunately for them, little did they know how stubborn. I was like, yeah, you're
messing with the wrong women.
Exactly. You did not know how stubborn these women were. I'm sorry, but we weren't. And, we step back sometimes, when we've kind of been tired out by it, because unfortunately we haven't had a lot of funding for the work that we've been doing. We're trying to build as an organization to try and build some of that funding and support to be able to continue, because it's really hard to do, to be consistently on the go and dealing with these big issues when you're not necessarily getting the support to be able to do that financially. So it's been interesting, and I think we have managed to make some shifts, but there's a lot of work to do.
Just to follow up on that, a lot of work. So collaboration. Can you share how important has partnerships been for you? Can you just share who are the successful collaborators? Who are your champions? Who are the people that have kind of helped lift you guys up and energize you? The moments when you guys are feeling like really despondent and just discouraged. Can you tell us a little bit about the people behind the scenes, behind your scenes?
Yeah, I mean, there's been quite a number. Initially when the campaign was first launched and we had all of that media attention, we had a lot of support from an organization called Neon in the UK, which supports, we did the training with them around media many years before, myself and Shaista, and they kind of supported us with essentially timetabling all of the media interest that we had and navigating the different producers, the different channels, the different radio stations, etc., that were showing interest and contacting us, because there was so much that we were finding it hard to have those conversations. And so they took all of that on. And, without them, I think we would have been a bit lost at the beginning, because it was so intense in terms of the media interest. And so they were huge, huge support to us as a team, and helped us with a lot of fine tuning of our messaging, what we were saying during interviews, making sure that we were saying the same things. And so we had to professionalize quite quickly. I mean, all of us had skills in terms of public speaking and doing media and stuff because of previous work that we've done, but it was so full on that we really needed a very clear messaging throughout. So they were huge to us, and still even now, always consider us for any media stories that come out, and will pitch us appropriately to media stations. And then obviously I mentioned kind of going into coalition with two other organizations called Level Up and EVIL, which is End Violence Against Women and Girls Coalition, in order to that work around gender-based violence in the game. And I think, the fact that there are two other organizations with us, with their different kind of skill sets and connections, meant that we were able to, in a very different way, but still have huge levels of impact in terms of policy change in that piece of campaigning work. So there's been quite a number, and there's been lots of people behind the scenes who've, strategists who've helped us. I mean, there's far too many to kind of try and remember all of them. But at different points, we've had different people come in and offer support. And we've won a few awards and been shortlisted for awards and been mentioned by various people. And, all of that, uplifting of our mission and what we're trying to do has been really significant for the work going forward.
So let's talk about awards and recognition. So how did we meet? You were recognized, Three Hijabis, yourself, Huda, and Shaista, recognized as vital voices under the Estee Lauder Emerging Funds Initiative. And that's where we met. That's why I heard about it. And again, the support from training, leadership training, that we received, I think it's and just really giving you access to this enormous network. And that's how I'm interviewing you today.
Yeah.
We often stand on the shoulders of others. The saying about, if you want to go, fast, go alone. If you want to go far, do it with others. How do people help you? How can we get support to your campaigns, the work you're doing around advocacy and training and trying to drive empowering Muslim women in their careers? Can you just tell our audience, how can they help?
I mean, there's lots and lots of ways to support the work that we're doing. If there's a way that we can help you if you're an organization that's trying to tackle and address some of these issues, that's some of the work that we're building at the moment. If you're struggling around dealing with Islamophobia, dealing with, your anti-racism work in the organization, we're trainers, we're facilitators, we do all of that kind of support. But other things is really about connections and about sharing the work that we're doing with your audiences. I think, for us, we've seen just how huge the media attention that we've had has really given our work credibility and given us a voice to be able to go to government, like we did, very early on in the petition. And Boris Johnson, who was the prime minister at the time, then had to speak and mention our petition in Parliament. That's exactly, but we can't do that. That's not because of the three of us. That's because 1 million people said we want something done about this because we're disgusted by what happened. And the more people that know about your work, the more people that are supporting it, the more people that are amplifying it, the more reach that it has and the more influence then you can have in terms of making the change.
It takes on a life of its own, which is what's
Exactly. That's, that's our biggest learning, is that collective responsibility that we all share is what is the thing that will create the biggest change. And that's been our thing. We always say that we didn't do this ourselves. We have a level of skill and a level of ability, but without those 1 million plus people that supported the work that we were doing, we would certainly not have the level of influence that we've had to be able to do this work. And so, please share. We've just recently rebranded our website. It's literally 3hijabis.com is the website. very easy. If you Google us, you'll find it quite easily. And you can see some of the work that we've done, media work and various campaigns that we've ran. We're on Twitter if you want to support us there. Again, the Three Hijabis on there. And we're on LinkedIn. And, like I said, we all have full-time jobs outside of doing this work. And so we're not always the most active on our socials, but we do try and make sure that we are sharing and posting regularly. And also we love to hear from people, what's your story? How are you feeling about some of these issues? What's your experience? Like I said, we had lots of that sharing when we first launched the petition. And we still do. Lots of, particularly women contact us about their experiences on the football pitch. And sometimes we're able to advise and guide. And sometimes people just want to tell us what has happened and how they might have dealt with a particular situation or a really positive stories.
That is absolutely phenomenal. You've started something, you've creating a space for people to share, to get involved. You've given them hope. You've sparked a movement. Shaista and Huda, that is absolutely incredible. We could talk to you forever. But thank you for your time. Thank you for all that you guys are doing with the Three Hijabis. And I'd love to check back in. It's people like you that changes the world.
Oh, thank you. And same for you. The fact that you're able to amplify, our stories and, what we're doing through your own work. I think, that is the big thing that is needed is women who will also share the stories of other women. And so I thank you for your time and supporting the work that we are doing.
Oh, my pleasure. And we're absolutely here for you. And I wish you, Huda and Shaista, all the best. And we will certainly be looking out and watching and following. Yeah?
Oh, thank you so much.
From challenging racism in football to fighting gender inequality and Islamophobia, their impact goes far beyond a viral tweet or a petition. They are holding institutions accountable, pushing for policies that ensure safer, more inclusive spaces, and amplifying voices that have been ignored for too long. Their work reminds us that activism doesn't just happen in stadiums or online. It happens in every conversation, every policy change, and every act of solidarity. These three remarkable women remind us that progress is a collective effort. Change happens when we refuse to be silent, and together, we can build a world where inclusion is not just an ideal, but a reality.
Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay curious and keep believing in the power of your voice. This is Awele Okibo, signing off for Credo Voices.